Hi, welcome back to Guarantee Solution. By the names I'm Abdul Hassan, and as a continuation to our Flutter book application, today we are going to look at the application launch logic, whereby we are going to handle the events that have to happen when a user launches an application. What do you have to do when a user launches the application? What events do you handle? So that's what you are going to handle, and in the process of checking checking the user authentication process, checking the user authentication, what are you supposed to be displaying to the user? All this you are going to do it with the help of the Flutter BLoC pattern. So stay tuned and let's get started. Okay, now welcome back. Okay, now in order for us to be able to authenticate users into our application, first of all, we must handle the events that happen when a user opens an application. Okay, we must be able to handle these events, whereby some of these events can include first of all checking or verifying the user authentication. Okay, to know whether this user is authenticated, and if he is authenticated, we must be able to move this person to the home screen, or if he is not authenticated, we must take this person to the sign-in screen. And in the process of checking the authentication checking the authentication state, we can show this user a splash screen. Okay, so in order to be able to handle those such events, what we are going to do, we are first of all we're going to bring in our BLoC. Okay, we're going to first bring in our BLoC into the application. Okay, so we are going to bring in the BLoC. What you are going to do, we are going to go under blocks. Okay, we are going to create a new block which is going to be authentication block. Authentication, and in this block we are going to have the authentication block itself. That we are going to have the authentication state. With that, also we shall have the authentication event. With that, okay, and this authentication event is part of the authentication block. Authentication block. That okay, so come to the state also is going to be part of the authentication state. That now, for those who have little knowledge about Flutter BLoC, I may recommend you either to check some of the one of my articles that I've ever written about Flutter BLoC, or any other article, or else you can refer to our video that where we introduced the theming of our application using Flutter BLoC. Okay, but still, even if you don't know anything, you can be able to catch up with us in this video. So we are going to have we are going to bring in the other event and state files. You are going to say part authentication state. That I'm going to bring in another part which is authentication event. Okay, it's event. That the reason why you bring in the authentication state and the reason why we declare them in this form is, first of all, we have to know that the events and state are supposed to be in one block. But in order to make our work untidy and to make it more flexible enough, we separate these files a little bit out so that we can be able to manage them well. So this is this one is doing self-reference, so it is going to be an authentication block, not authentication state. Okay, so now we are going to create the abstract. Well, okay, we shall go under the authentication event and we shall create our interface, which is abstract authentication event extends equitable. Okay, we must import this equitable. I think it's already imported. Not yet. Extends equitable. It's abstract class. Okay, it's abstract class. So this is abstract class. So we are going to import that, and let's come here, move it up in the hierarchy. So we now have it. Okay, so we are now going to create the first event, which is going to be to verify the user authentication. It will be class verify authentication, or we can just call it is authenticated. Which is going to be the event which is going to trigger the verification of the user authentication. Extends authentication event, and we can now bring in the missing overrides. Okay, it's going to take null it's going to take no prompt. Okay, so for now we can just have that particular event, and other events will come in later. So we can now go to the state and also create those necessary states. Some of the states we are going to first of all create the interface, the authentication interface. That is authentication state interface is going to be abstract class authentication state extends equitable. And now we are going to have our first state, which is going to be authenticated. Another one is going to be unauthenticated. And the other will be verifying auth. Okay, so the first one is going to be class unauthenticated unauthenticated state, or authentic. We can just add an unauthenticated state just to be able to know whether it is a state or not. Extends authentication state, and you can bring in the missing overrides, and also this one is going to have no prop. The other state is going to be authenticated state extends authentication state. Let's just copy that. And now what we can do here, the authenticated state, we can now bring in for this case, when the user is authenticated, we can return the authenticated user to whoever wants to consume it. So for this case, we shall be able to return the user, and let's create that model of the user. We shall come under models and create the app user. So this is going to be app user with that, and we are going to have class app user. This user is going to have, we are going to have one string. We are going to have the user ID, or just ID. We can just call it ID. We are going to have the name of the user, the email of the user, and we can have the phone number. Also, the other thing that we would like maybe to take from the user would be the date of birth, name, ID, name, email, phone number, first name and last name. Actually, it's supposed to be first name and last name. First name and last name. Okay. The other part will be the image URL of the user, that is the image URL. Then the push tokens, that one we shall bring them later. The push tokens are so important if you want to be sending the push notification to these users. So the push tokens we shall bring in later, and these ones we expect them sometimes they can be null. So we are going to have final int the creation date time release, creation date time release. When this user was created, we are going to have the date of birth, time release, date of birth, time release. Need that, or maybe you can just have that. And other variables we shall bring them later. Let's create the constructor. And now this, you can just do this. Let's create our first the factory that is going to help us extract this from a map in case it's coming from an API or a backend. So for this case, we are going to have factory app user dot from JSON. We are going to pass the map, which is going to be string and dynamic. It's going to be having string and dynamic. And in this case, we are just going to return the app user. Let's copy these, bring them here, and now we are going to remove them and extract them from the map. As a developer, it's so important to know the keyboard shortcuts of your editor that you are using, because it makes your work very easy, hence making the whole process faster. And also, we are going to make sure we are going to make to JSON. We are going to create one which converts this object, this class, into a JSON file. So we are going to have to JSON return. So in case you are saving to a backend, we just say app user dot to JSON, and it will give us the necessary JSON. So we are going to copy that and bring it here, and we are going to remove the this keyword, put this in the form of a string. First copy it, put that in a string format, and add the necessary append. Okay, give them the necessary variables that matches. So that's it generally. So within our we can now go back to our authentication state, and here we are just going to say now final authenticated state. We expect an app user who is not null. I think an app user who is not null, an app user. And for this case, we can now create this constructor, authenticated state. What is it? Try declaring a 0 constructor in authenticated state, or doesn't have. Okay, so now we can copy this there. Authenticated state. I think something is wrong. The superclass doesn't have a 0 argument constructor. Try declaring argument constructor in authenticated state explicit. I can't. Oh, this is authentication state. Actually, it's just doing self-reference, so it is supposed to be extends authentication state, not authenticated state. Extends authentication state. Now we are going to go. Okay, so the other one is going to be class verifying authentication, verifying auth state extends authentication state, and this one is not going to have any argument passed to it. Sorry. So we can now go to our block, authentication block, and we create the block itself. It's going to be class authentication block extends block, and we are going to pass the authentication state. Authentication state. Actually, okay, putting the word authenticated state, it wasn't a good idea, but we have nothing to do with it. This is extends authentication event. So we are going to import this from Flutter block, and we are going to create the constructor. Okay. So the initial state, actually we need to create the initial state. We are going to come here and create the initial state. The initial state is going to be uninitialized class, uninitialized extends authentication state. Okay, I think we need to remove just this authenticated state, because it's a little bit confusing. So let's just remove it. Let's remove the state itself, and authenticated also, and verifying auth, so that we can just have a uniform stuff that we are able to maintain. And let's create the override. So if the state is uninitialized, we are going to take this person to the splash point. So here we are going to have this, instead of having the authentication event, we are just going to have unauthenticated. Okay. No, uninitialized. So that's what we are going to have. Okay. The argument can't be assigned to parameter of type. Okay, let's see. The block takes event and state. Oh, we interchange this. This is supposed to be event and state. Okay, now we are good to go. So we are going to have the unauthenticated state, the uninitialized. So now we can now create our listeners that are listening to these particular events. Okay. Our listeners now we are going to have on is authenticated, and we are going to create a handler that is handle verify auth. Okay, handle verify user auth, and we are going to create the method which is going to be able to handle that. And which other event did we have? We just had only that. So the other part, what we are going to do, we are now going to create the necessary repositories, and the providers. Now the repository and the provider. So what we are going to do, we are going to come under providers. Before we create the repository, we are first of all going to come under our providers. Now, what is a provider? A provider is this is a low-level layer, okay, whose work is only to interact with the backend. Interact with the backend by fetching the necessary data, handling the backend interactions only. And the provider should be written in a form of it's the packages that it has. There's no package that is interacting with the UI directly. Okay. The provider packages, there should be no package that interacts with the UI. Okay, that is UI dependent. This one makes it loosely coupled, and makes it easier for us to reuse this provider in another application, or even we can decide to publish it and for other people to use it. Okay, so making our provider in a way that it doesn't have any attachment to our UI is a good thing. And now when we come to the repository, the repository for it now, this is the intermediate guy between the BLoC and the provider. The repository, its main work is interacting with the provider. Okay, now the repository can interact with multiple providers. Okay, the repository can have multiple providers that interacts, or that he or she interacts with, and in that sense, it now brings in the business. It now brings in the whole business logic. So the repository brings in the whole business logic of the application. So now we are going to have our provider, and for this case, first of all going to have the base provider. Okay, the base provider, and for this case, we are just going to have a folder whereby we are going to have what we call base. This is where we are going to be saving our interfaces for the providers. In case we decide to change a provider, we just make that provider implement our interface. Okay, and now we are going to have the other. Okay, we are just going to have the base providers, the base. So we are going to have what we call base authentication provider. That. And now for this case, we are going to have an abstract class base authentication provider. So within this base authentication provider, this is where we put our methods that the provider has to override. Okay, like now for the method we can try to put here, one can be to check the user authentication. We can say maybe checking if the user is authenticated. We can say a future. We can have a future that returns a boolean. Future that returns a boolean, and we can just ask is authenticated. Is logged in or is logged in, or okay, you can say is logged in, just like that. And this one now is what we'll have to check if the user of this application is authenticated, if there is some user saved somewhere in the state. So we can have that. And for now we can just have this. Other things will come in later. So now we can have the other provider himself, that is the authentication provider. The authentication provider dot that. So now we can create the authentication provider, implementing or extending the base authentication provider. Authentication provider extends base authentication provider. Now already is now demanding us to override the other function that was created. So create missing override. Now we have it. So it's now having the other function that is checking if the user is authenticated. Okay. And now for us to check if the user is authenticated, what we can do, we can now check within Firebase to say, okay, since we decided to use the Firebase auth, we can check if within Firebase the user is authenticated. If within Firebase there is an instance of a user, okay, and in that case we can return true or false. So to do that, we are going to come here and say Firebase. We're going to have the final, which is Firebase auth, Firebase auth is equal to Firebase auth dot instance. Okay, so down here we can now check for the Firebase user, that is final Firebase user is equal to Firebase auth dot current user. So what we can do, we can now check. We can now just return if return Firebase user dot is not null. Return Firebase user dot is not equal to null, and Firebase user dot UI ID is also not equal to null. Actually is not empty is what we can use. Dot is not empty. And just say this is async. Okay, so it is we are going to return if Firebase user is not equal to null, and if it is not null, check if the UI ID is also not empty. Okay, it may not be null, but the UI ID is empty, meaning that the user is not authenticated. So for now we can just have that. So okay, what we are going to do this to make, okay, now we can now come to our repositories and create the authentication repository. This is going to be authentication repository like that. And now we are going to have the class authentication repository Okay, authentication repository. So we are going to have a final base authentication provider, and this is going to be authentication provider is equal to authentication provider. Okay, so we are going to have our function that checks if the user is authenticated. We are going to have a future boolean that checks is logged in. And now this one is just not going to do anything much, but to refer to the authentication provider if the user is not logged in. Authentication provider is logged in, and that's it. So that one means that our block, in case it wants to check if the user is authenticated, it should just check from the repository directly. So what we can do here, we are going to first require our repository to be created. That is a final authentication repository authentication repository. And here what you are going to do, you are going to create a constructor with the authentication repository required. And among the things that we need, we must make sure that the authentication repository is not null, that the authentication repository is provided to us. So here within the verify user auth, what you are going to do here, just going to come here and say, first of all, we are going to meet an event. We are going to emit the event which says that we are verifying the state, we're verifying the user authentication, and we are going to check to have a boolean, that says is authenticated, being equal to authentication repository dot is logged in. We are going to await for this, and here we shall provide the async, which comes with the data async. So for this case, we are going to check if is authenticated. We are going to return yield. We are not yield. We are going to emit the authenticated state. That's what we are going to emit. The authenticated state actually here we must emit with the user himself. Okay, we must emit with the user. So either we can make our is logged in return a user rather than a boolean, or we can now have another event that is fetching the user here. Okay, for now what you are just going to do, you are just going to provide a null user for now. Okay, we are just going to provide a null user, and that is going to be const app user, just nothing else. And if the user is not authenticated, else if he is not authenticated, just emit unauthenticated. So that's it. That's the logic that we need to have. So we can now go to our main file, and within our multi providers we should also provide the authentication provider or the authentication repository to be part, the authentication block to be part of the multi providers. So before that, we shall have the authentication repository initialized here. That is a final authentication repository is equal to authentication repository. So now we are going to have authentication because what does it take? Takes in nothing. The error is for what? Okay, I think it's no error. Okay, now we are going to have our block, which is going to be BLoC Provider, and we are going to create BLoC Provider of type Authentication Block. And now we are going to create it. Let's first import it. Now we are going to create it by saying Authentication Block. Okay. Over by it's expecting the repository, that is the authentication repository provided to it. Can't be assigned to type Authentication Block. Oh shit. Okay, this is supposed to be create context. Create context like that. So now we can have that, and at this stage, this is now where we are supposed to check if the user is authenticated. So here we are going to go to pass an event that says that checks if the user is authenticated. That is authenticated. That is the question that you are going to ask our blog to verify for us. And now when we come back to our actually, we need to remove this home so that we no longer need it. Actually, we need now to have something which is good officially. Remove that, and also this, remove it. So here we're going to have a block builder, a block builder of type authentication block, Okay. Within here we are going to have what called a builder, and now this builder is going to take in the state, and it's going to give us the state and the context, and the state. What else? The block is already defined, so we don't need to have anything. Block builder, supposed to be block builder, authentication block, and authentication state. So now this is authentication state. Good. And for now, it's just going to return a container. I think we have an error somewhere. Could not find correct provider. Okay, it's okay. We have to restart the application. That's why we are having that. So we are going to restart it. And now let's come to within our views, and here we are going to have a folder called home, which is the home screen, which is going to be provided to the user in case he's authenticated. And within here we are just going to have a single file saying home.dat. And now this is going to be class stateless widget. We are going to have home screen. Actually, this is home screen. .dat. And now in here we are going to import the Flutter material, and this is going to be a scaffold with the home, or that's a body, being a container, And now for this container, we can just give it a color to know whether we have it. And this color, we can say colors.red. Okay, colors.red. It's okay. I'm going there first. Now we can come here and also create another one, which is a splash screen. Splash. So within the splash screen, we are going to say splash screen. This is the one which is going to be displayed to the user initially when you are verifying the state. So this is going to be splash screen.dat. The stateless. You can have a stateless widget, set for widget. No, let's have a set for widget, because we plan to have some animation within. That is a splash screen. And for this case, we can have the material constant. The other one is going to be the sign-in screen. Sign-in. So within here, we can have the sign-in screen like that. And now this is going to be stateless widget. Stateful, stateless. Okay, stateless widget for now. It's going to be sign-in screen. We can import the material, and also here we return a scaffold. Wrap this guy with this scaffold, with this being a body, and the color for this scaffold can be colors.green. Color can be colors. Or the other one we returned, we can have this as red. Colors.home will return which color? We return red, so for this we can just return green. Okay, we can just return green. So now we can come back to our splash screen. Okay, our splash screen is also supposed to be having some kind of color for us to know whether it has come. Let's give it a scaffold also. Scaffold. This is a body, and now within here we can return colors.blue. So now we can come to the main file, and within the block builder, we can now start doing the real logic of saying, one, we are going to check. If state is authenticated. If state is authenticated, we are going to return the home screen. Okay, the home screen which we need to import, and this is a constant. Okay, else if state is unauthenticated. Oh, okay, sample is needed. Is unauthenticated. We are going to return a constant of sign-in screen. Else we just return. Also, we just return a splash screen, which is also constant. And now when we restart this, we should be able to first see the blue screen, which is the splash screen, then later either have the sign-in screen, which is a green screen, or a red screen, which is a home screen. So let's restart this. Restarting. And there we go. It has restarted. We've got a green screen. A green screen meaning that it's not authenticated. Yeah, green screen meaning that it's a sign-in screen. It's not authenticated. If we give in some kind of delay, we shall be able to see the blue screen, which is the splash screen. Okay, and for this case, what we can do first, okay, first let's remove this debug banner. The debug banner, we can remove it from here by saying debug banner mode false. Check. Gone. So now what we can do for here, we can try to return a splash screen to make sure that is fully designed. Then later, to make sure that the splash screen is fully designed. Then later, we can return everything to normal. So what we can do, we can override all this, skip all this from up here by saying return a splash screen, which means these other things are not going to run. Comment that. Now we have the splash screen. Okay, so now it's high time to make sure that we make it, we design it, and leave it. So now the splash screen is going to have a single ticker provider, provider state mixing, that is for animation purposes, and we are going to have an animation which is late animation controller. We're also going to have a late animation itself of type double, animation type double. We're going to have animation. Now on initting our state, okay, before even bringing in the init state, we can try to design the screen. Instead of having the blue, just mere blue, we can now have a decoration or box decoration. And within box decoration, we can have now the gradient, which is a linear gradient. And within this linear gradient, we shall have the colors. We can have the colors, and these colors are going to be coming from theme. The first color is going to be theme, or is going to be our primary color. Then the other one is going to be our primary light and our primary dark. So that's what we're going to provide here. Theme of context dot primary light, and we are going to have also theme dot of context primary dark. Okay. Yeah, it's coming. So what you can do, we can bring in what we call stops. Not even stops, we have the begin and stop. So we can begin from top center. The begin is alignment, so it's going to be alignment dot top center, and it's going to end at alignment dot bottom center. Bottom center, I think it's okay. It's a little bit coming from top center, bottom center. So we can now have some stops, which is 1 at 1 0 and another 1 0 0. So this is just mainly 0, stop at 0 and another one at 1. Yeah, you can have it that way. And these types can be in constant form because they're just number values. So we can have what else? Clamp, tile mode. This will be tile mode dot clamp. So that's it. Within our center, or within the children. So what we can do, we can have the child having a column, and the column, this is going to have children. Are we okay? The children, we are going to have a center, which is a child of circular progress bar, progress indicator. Okay, of color, I think it's going to be value colors. Okay, value color, which is always stopped animation, and we are going to provide colors dot white for now. We need this at the center, so which means our column, we are going to put the cross-axis alignment. We're going to be the cross-axis alignment of center. The main axis alignment. Actually, the main axis alignment is going to be main axis alignment dot center still. So we have it there. So the other part is to have maybe the name of our application somewhere. The name of the application. And now this name is going to be text, and this is just going to be bookmate. Actually, we are going to refer to app constants dot app name. That's what we are going to pass here. App constants dot app name. Someone is yelling, and style. This is going to be theme dot of context dot text theme. Okay, let me hope that someone is not going to explode here, because the way the machine is yelling. Dot headline. Yeah, we're just going to give it a headline. Yeah. And this we are going to copy with, so that we'll be able to change the color. This that is color. This is colors dot white. We need some kind of margin that is constant. Sized box, height 10. Okay, sorry about that. One thing, okay, my PC had got an issue and it crashed. So wherever we ended, I'm just going to try to pick up from there and try to end this video so that we can begin from there in the next one. So after having the splash screen displaying that, I think one thing we have to know, our font is not okay. So what we are going to do is we are going to go to the app theme, that is the app palette. And we make sure that it is following the font name. The font is using Poppin. It's supposed to be Poppins, not Poppin. Poppins, I think. Okay, so it's supposed to be pop-ins. So I'm going to refresh this. Nothing. Okay, let me restart. And now we have the pop-in itself loaded. So that's it. One other thing that we are going to do, we are going to maybe add some kind of animation to this splash screen of ours. Okay, this piece is again yelling again, so let's pray that we are able to finish this. So we are going to say init state, and we are going to initialize our animation controller, which is animation controller is equal to animation controller vsync. We are going to use this. The ticker, we are going to use this single ticker provider state mixing, and duration, we are going to give it a constant duration of milliseconds. Milliseconds, we are going to give it 800 milliseconds. Okay, and the animation itself, now the animation we are going to use trim. Now for those who want to know more about the animation stuff, more about animation, you can let me know in the comment section, so that maybe I can make a video about animations, what is an animation controller, or how can we make animations and manipulate them in our applications. So you can let me know in the comment section. So this is going to be animation is equal to twin. We are going to use the twin animation, and now this is going to be a double twin animation of type double. We are going to give it a begin, which is going to be 0.0, and it is going to end with 1.0. okay, so afterwards we have to define the animation itself. That is the curve. So this is going to be dot animate, actually, dot animate. This is we are going to use a curved animation, and the parent is going to be animation controller. The curve itself, we are going to use curves dot is in circles. Okay, is in sync. That is what we are going to use. And now here we can either wait for the widgets to all the widgets to bind, or before we forward the animation, or before we start the animation, or we can just animate it from here, because the splash screen, remember, it's just going to load for some few seconds, and it will disappear based on the state. So here we are going to say animation controller dot forward. Just pray for me that we are able to finish this video, because this guy, the way he's yelling, I think I need to get a new emulator. All the problems are coming from the emulator with the screen recording. So we are going to do that, and for now we are going to come back to our text, the column. We are going to animate the column, which is just the text itself. We are going to fade it. So we are going to say to use the fade transition. That is fade transition, and the fade transition, they want the animation. They want is the opacity. They want the opacity, so it is opacity, and this opacity we are just going to use the animation itself. Save that, reload. I think let initialization wasn't successful, so we are going to start. Now it has done it the way you need it. It animates the text to bring it in. So if you want to know more about animation, let me know. And also now what you have to know that I'm trying to spend enough time with this with this video, trying to give in more explanation as much as I can, because as I said in the beginning, we are doing this video for those who are beginners. Okay, we are doing this video for also those who are beginners to catch up and be able to have something at the end of the day. So thanks. For this case, we are going to end here, and we shall begin from there in the real authentication part of our application. Have a nice day. Peace.